Yo, what's going on? This is DJ Biggs from DJ Media NYC. This is like a little drop in between the upcoming episodes for Comfort the Bass NYC Radio. Just want to give you guys like a quick tune in what's been going on the last couple of days. As I said earlier, we was checking in on some festivals, some film festivals here and there, and this is kind of like the wrap up. This is the wrap up from the African Film Festival in Lincoln Center. We did the last 2 days. Unfortunately, we didn't catch Lincoln Center from the beginning due to like concurrent film festivals, run at the same speed, same time. And then we end up catching the last 2 nights of the African Film Festival in Lincoln Center. It's actually running the entire month of May. The first half, or the first day, was at the African Center on Fifth Avenue. Then at Lincoln Center. And then after Lincoln Center, it goes into Mayless. I hope I'm saying it right. Documentary Center out in Harlem, and then it wraps it up at the end of the month in BAM in Brooklyn. The last 2 nights that we did at the African Film Festival, we caught The Tree of Authenticity first, and then we caught The Man Died, which was pretty much the closing night film in the Lincoln Center part of it. We first saw the tree of Authenticity, which is kind of like a documentary narrative. It wasn't so much like a documentary itself. The Tree of Authenticity, which was a kind of like a film essay from Sami Balochi. I hope I'm saying this right. If I screw it up, my apologies. It was pretty much a film that was exploring Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, its history of Congo, from colonialism to the Civil War, imperialism, and all of that, and the significance of ecology, the reference of Mother Nature, and how the two pretty much kind of coexist in the same speed, like pretty much one affect the other and vice versa. And it started from the 1930s. Actually, no, it actually started like in the 1900s. The film itself started from like research and essays from the 1900s and ends in about the 1950s or so. It was from a narrative point of view. You had a narrator kind of like giving the audience, giving the audience like different pieces of history in the Congo, where once colonialism, took over the Congo, how that affected the Congo, like the landscape of Congo, whether it affected the plant life, the wildlife, well, mostly referring to the plant life and the water and stuff like that, which was pretty cool and it's pretty fascinating because it opened up my eyes a bit, because you hear so much about the Congo, the Civil War, the people that came out of it, and the aftermath of the Civil War and stuff like that, and you do hear about colonialism in the Congo, and this film was just a different look into it. I personally would say that we liked the film. We walked in there and pretty much observed it. It was a great film all around, because it gave you it was like a research essay, if you will, about how is the earth being affected by pretty much by war in a nutshell. And being the fact that the Congo, what many people may not know about the Congo, was that it has the second largest rainforest in the planet, right? The first, obviously, the largest is the Amazon. And even the Amazon is starting to lose some of its ground due to excessive, burning of trees and whatnot. So this here pretty much talks about how the rainforest itself in the Congo, by the Congo River, is affected by destruction because of colonialism, colonization, and how they looked at the rainforest as just this thing that needs to be destroyed. So this film pretty much documented all of that from different research scientists from the Congo that pretty much traced the origin. If you will go back to the origin of the background stories of how has colonization affected Congo. And it was a great film. We didn't get a chance to stay for the Q&A. We missed that part. But I would have to say overall, with this documentary, it's always good to kind of get research. Because that's pretty much what we did. Like, once we saw the movie, we were literally was like, you know what? Well, let's start tapping into more and more, like, into the Congo. Like, how is the environment of the Congo has been affected due to the destruction of the rainforest, the river has been affected, all that type of stuff. It wasn't a long film. It was close to 90 minutes, but it didn't feel like it. And going to Lincoln Center is always a beautiful thing to do. So we kind of was like, all right, this was one down. We finally got a chance to watch and observe, and it was a great film. That was the first film, The Tree of Authenticity, which was narrated by Edson Anibal. And I hope that's why I'm trying to get these names down, as much as possible. There was 2 short films there. One, The Planet of Water, which was like 3 minutes or some change. And the other one, which was, I'm hoping saying that because it was in like Spanish. It was called La Serpiente de Chamica, which kind of goes. Both films was pretty much about the planet, because this particular evening that we was at was more about the environmental injustice of the African Film Festival. And this was like the environmental part of it, which was pretty good to us. Sometimes it's nice to kind of break out of the documentary narrative. Documentaries not about peoples and wars and stuff like that, but to learn about the planet. And again, these films pretty much gave us, a great foundation to start with, to really tapping into the environment a little bit more. So that was a good thing. So we listened to that, and then the following night, we got into the last night, the closing night of the African Film Festival at Lincoln Center. Was called The Man Died, which was a fictional narrative from the book of Wale Soyinka, who was a playwright, a novelist, and an educator from Nigeria. And this was at the time of the Nigerian Civil War back in the 60s. And this film itself, which again, like we said, was a fictional narrative of the book that Wale wrote. The film starts in the 60s. It doesn't end. Of course, it ends with the Civil War closing out. But the film itself was pretty much about Wale's, what's the word we're looking for here? We're looking for like a word, participation, if you will. Because when you look at the film, it was pretty much Wale's, pretty much he was trying to be a third party or help with a group that was third party between the two sides that was battling. He wanted the two sides to come together, or his group wanted the two sides to come together And it started from him being captured, being released, him being captured again, being in prison, and it was pretty much a time frame where he was in prison, because he was only in prison for like 2.5 to 3 years. And in that 2.5 to 3 years time, by the time he got out, the Civil War was over. So this pretty much filling in the gaps where he was in prison, and talks about him in there. And it was a great film, because again, this was like a film that needed, that's, you know, it's needed, you know, because you always want to hear about, when you hear about films that is needed, especially what's going on in the world today, which was definitely something that we looked into. The film itself was directed by Awam Ampika, which this was actually the U.S. premiere, because it had premiered outside the United States, of course. This is the first time it was there here in the U.S., so there was a lot of things that we couldn't really, like, say until the film was released. So that's why you're getting this now, that we saw the film and we was like, this is a phenomenal film. This film, to me, and to us, we watched it with such, like, invigorism, because the acting itself was phenomenal. Like, you know, the dialogue in there between the characters, as far as, like, between the guy, I'm trying to remember the guy who played Wally, because there was so many different cast in there, because, like, the guy who actually played Wally in the movie, he did such a phenomenal job. Like, the mannerisms, and the funny thing is, when you look at the film, you think it's him in the movie, and it's not really necessarily him in the movie. But it was a great mixture of fiction and real life, because of course it talks about the Civil War, and then from there on in, it goes into this climax of where the Civil War is over, but Wally still has a lot of work to be done. In between, it talks about Wally with his marriage, and of course there was people that was helping Wally in it, including I guess he had another woman. Like, he had a wife and he had another woman in there, and then even his peers was looking at him kind of like, how was you able to get all this down? You know, having people to help you out, which pretty much was the goal, because he's an educator. And we're also going to a backstory where he wasn't even in Nigeria when the Civil War started. He was actually in Europe when the Civil War started. So this film kind of covered all those bases in between, leading him to be captured. And in the prison, there's scenes with him in prison, you know, doing hunger strikes and distractions, because he knew at the end they was trying to kill him, because it felt like he was doing work for the other side and not being neutral. So this was like a great suspense, like thriller almost, because you think that he was going to die. Obviously, he don't die. So, you know, they did a good job of it. The music was phenomenal. We did a question, a Q&A at the end of the film, and the film itself had a great, like, reference to high life music in Africa in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And for those who don't know what high life music is in Africa, all you have to do is think of one name, Femi Kuti, he was part of that high life trend in the 60s, like pretty much just the origins of Afrobeats, but it's like real Afrobeat. And the movie kind of gives a nod to those high life musicians of the 60s and 70s with this movie. And of course, in the film itself, you see real people, maybe the names have changed a little bit here and there, being affected by the war itself. Many people looked out for the doctor, Wale, and tried to do the best they can to help them. But of course, in turn, they had to realize they had a job to do, which was to make sure that he doesn't get away from their presence. And also, if he can't be if you couldn't answer the question that they asked them, then they'll have to kill him. So all that into the film, it was great. I personally thought that the script that they wrote down was pretty good because it deep dive into the nooks and crannies of the Nigerian Civil War. How the Civil War, not so much how it started, and how it affected the people who lived during that time. So the people who lived during that time, it totally like affected them in so many different ways that you see it, the wear and tear of the war from not only the two sides participating, but the neutral side of while it was leading. So all that in the film, it worked out. We thought it was a great film to close out the Lincoln Center part of the African Film Festival. We know it's not being released in the U.S. yet. I believe it's supposed to be hitting streaming services soon. Doesn't know when. When it does, we're going to promote it, give you all the heads up. So this is our wrap up from the Lincoln Center version part of the African Film Festival, the 32nd annual African Film Festival. So this is our wrap up of it. Stay tuned. We'll drop the wrap up of the Rock and Roll Festival as well. Alright, peace.